I woke up at 6:30 in the morning as usual. My habit of getting up early as a nurse has stayed with me even 7 years after retiring. Outside the window, the Sunday morning in Lakeview looked gray and dreary, typical for October. I pulled on my robe and went to the kitchen, where I turned on the kettle and took the shopping list I had written the night before out of the refrigerator. Octavia was coming over with her family today. Every second Sunday of the month was a tradition my daughter had started 3 years ago after Henry's death. "Mom, you need to spend more time with your family," Octavia had said at the time, and I agreed, even though I already sensed something behind her ostentatious concern. After finishing my tea, I got dressed and grabbed my bag. The Fresh Mart supermarket was a 10-minute walk from my house on Maple Street. I didn't like taking the bus on weekends. Too many noisy teenagers and families with strollers. It was quieter on foot. In the store, I methodically made my way through all the departments. Meat for the roast. Octavia doesn't eat beef. Barnaby can't stand pork, so chicken it is. Potatoes, carrots, onions. In the dairy section, I lingered over the cheese. Cordelia likes sharp varieties, and Felix only likes processed cheese. There was no compromise, so I would have to get both. At the checkout, there was a young mother with 2 children in front of me. The kids were acting up, demanding candy, and the woman looked exhausted. I remembered my Octavia at that age. She also knew how to throw a tantrum at the most inopportune moment. At the time, it seemed that things couldn't get any worse. How wrong I was. When I got home, I immediately started cooking. The chicken had to be marinated for at least 2 hours, and the potato casserole took a long time to cook at a low temperature. As I worked, I thought about the evening ahead and frowned involuntarily. My relationship with my daughter began to deteriorate gradually when Octavia was about 30. At first, it was little jibes about how I dressed, what I read, who my friends were. Then came the helpful advice: how to better arrange the house, how to spend my pension, what to do in my free time. Octavia seemed to think I was incapable of making my own decisions. After Henry's death, the situation worsened. My daughter took on the role of head of the family and clearly expected me to nod obediently and follow her instructions. But Alba Crampton had lived for 67 years, raised 2 children, worked for 40 years in a hospital, and had no intention of turning into a helpless old woman just because it was convenient for her daughter. Her son Damien lived in another state and rarely visited. His relationship with Octavia had always been strained. They were too different. He preferred to stay out of family disputes, which I didn't blame him for. Everyone has their own life. After putting the chicken in the oven, I started cleaning the vegetables. The work was calming and allowed me to take my mind off unpleasant things. At 2 o'clock, Octavia called. "Mom, Barnaby and I decided not to bring wine today. He's been having stomach problems lately, and the kids can't have any anyway." "All right, dear. Would you like some tea? Or coffee?" "Tea, of course. You know I don't drink coffee after 4. It makes me nervous. And buy something for tea, cookies, or cake. Felix complained yesterday that you always have crackers." I pursed my lips. I bought the crackers especially for Felix. He used to love them. But children's tastes change quickly, and grandmothers have to keep up with those changes. "I'll buy cookies," I replied curtly. "And one more thing, Mom. Cordelia is on a diet. She's getting ready for the school prom. Don't be offended if she doesn't eat much." Cordelia is 16, slim as a reed, but she's been on various diets for 3 years. Octavia encourages this nonsense, believing that her daughter should watch her figure from a young age. "Got it. What time will you be home?" "At 5. Oh, and don't cook too much. We're leaving early today. Barnaby has to work tomorrow at 6 in the morning." I hung up and looked at the half-cooked dinner. So they'll sit down for an hour and a half, eat in a hurry, and rush off. Why bother coming home at all? But I knew the answer. Octavia considered it her duty to control me, to check that everything was in order, and that I hadn't done anything wrong. At 3:30, I went to the store to buy some cookies. I bought 2 different kinds, chocolate chip and oatmeal. They could choose. When I returned, I set the table in the living room. I used the beautiful tablecloth Damien had given me and the nice dishes. The wedding set that Octavia considered too simple for modern standards. I put out a vase with jam from my own garden and set the table. The chicken was almost ready and the potatoes were browned. The whole house smelled delicious. I changed into a nice dress, a dark blue one that my daughter thought made me look 10 years older, but which I liked myself. I combed my graying hair and touched up my lips. At 4:50, I heard the sound of a car pulling up to the driveway. My heart sank unpleasantly, a feeling that came every time my daughter was about to arrive. It was like before an exam or an unpleasant conversation with my boss. At 67, I was afraid of my own child. Absurd, but true. I took a deep breath, adjusted my dress, and went to open the door. The evening was beginning. Octavia got out of the car first, as always. Tall, slender, in a strict gray coat and high-heeled shoes. Even on a Sunday, she looked as if she was on her way to a business meeting. The others followed, Barnaby in a worn jacket and jeans, Cordelia in a fashionable short sheepskin coat, Felix in a hooded sweatshirt. "Hi, Mom." Octavia kissed me on the cheek, leaving a faint trace of lipstick. "How are you? You look tired." "Everything's fine," I replied, accepting hugs from the others. Barnaby shook my hand firmly in a manly way. Cordelia hugged me half-heartedly, already taking her phone out of her purse. Felix pressed himself against me sincerely. He hadn't yet reached the age of teenage aloofness. "Is Grandpa's chair still here?" Octavia asked, looking around the living room. "Mom, we told you it's time to get rid of it. It looks like a museum." I said nothing. Henry's chair stood in the corner, and I wasn't going to get rid of it just because my daughters didn't like it. Sometimes I sat in it in the evenings, reading or just looking out the window. It seemed to me that the chair still retained the scent of my husband's cologne. "Sit down at the table, I'll serve dinner," I said instead of answering. The family sat down in the living room. Cordelia immediately immersed herself in her phone. Felix began looking at family photos on the mantelpiece, and Barnaby silently examined the new curtains. Octavia sat down opposite me and began examining the table setting. "This tableware is very old-fashioned, Mom. We could buy you something more modern for the new year." "I like it," I replied calmly, setting out the plates with food. "But look at the thick rims on the cups, and the pattern is so provincial. We have completely different tableware at home from Denmark. It's very stylish." Barnaby frowned and looked at his wife with slight irritation. He always felt uncomfortable when Octavia started her educational talks with me. "Denmark is nice," he said diplomatically. "But it's beautiful here too, isn't it, Cordelia?" The girl looked up from the screen and nodded absently, not listening to the conversation. I served the main course. The chicken was juicy, the potatoes were golden brown, and the vegetables were just right. I was proud of my cooking skills, even though Octavia regularly offered me recipes from the internet that were healthier and more modern. "Delicious, Grandma," Felix said sincerely, helping himself to a second helping. "Don't overeat, Felix," his mother scolded him. "You already have weight issues." The boy grimaced but obediently put down his spoon. I noticed how his eyes dimmed and something ached in my chest. Felix is 13, he's growing, he needs to eat. But Octavia is obsessed with everyone around her conforming to her ideas of what is right. "Can I have some more?" Cordelia asked, to everyone's surprise. "You're on a diet," her mother reminded her. "I ran 5 kilometers this morning. I can break the rules once." I silently put some more chicken on the girl's plate. Cordelia was like me at that age. Tall, angular, with long, thin arms. Only my granddaughter's character was gentler, not so stubborn. A familiar atmosphere of slight tension settled over the table. Octavia talked about her work, complaining about her colleagues and bosses. Barnaby occasionally interjected with neutral comments. The children ate silently, glancing at their watches. "By the way, Mom," Octavia said when the main courses were finished, "I was talking to Sarah Miller the other day. Do you remember Sarah? She works at a real estate agency now. She says the houses in our neighborhood are selling very well." "And?" I asked cautiously. "Just saying. It's just that the house is too big for one person, and it's expensive to maintain. Maybe you should think about something more compact. There are some very nice apartments for seniors, with a concierge and medical services." I put my cup down on the saucer a little harder than I should have. "I'm not moving anywhere." "But Mom, be reasonable. What if something happens to you? We live 20 minutes away. We won't always be able to get there quickly." "Nothing will happen to me." "How do you know?" Anything can happen at your age. Barnaby frowned again. Octavia, maybe we shouldn't talk about this now. When is the right time? We're adults. We have to plan for the future. I got up from the table. I'll put the kettle on. In the kitchen, I slowly counted to 10, calming myself down. It was always the same. Octavia found a way to hint that I wasn't living right, that I needed to change something, improve, optimize. It was as if I were a faulty mechanism that needed constant adjustment. I took out the good cups, the ones with thick rims and a provincial pattern. I put cookies, jam, and a sugar bowl on a tray. The kettle boiled just in time. "Tea's ready," I called out. The family gathered around the table again. The mood had lightened a little. Felix was talking about his school history project, and Cordelia was complaining about a difficult math test. Octavia listened to the children with the attentive expression of a mother, occasionally correcting them or offering advice. I was pouring tea into cups when I noticed my daughter's strange behavior. Octavia glanced at my cup several times, then quickly looked around as if to check if anyone was watching. When I turned back to the kettle, my daughter leaned forward and quickly poured something from a small bag into my cup. I froze, holding the teapot in my hands. My heart began to beat faster. I couldn't believe my eyes. Had my daughter really put something in my tea? Why? What for? Octavia leaned back in her chair, looking completely natural. She smiled at me. "Mom, are you going to pour the tea or just stand there?" "Yes, of course," I replied mechanically. I finished pouring the tea, thinking all the time about what I had seen. Maybe I imagined it? But no, the movement was too precise, too secretive. Octavia had definitely put something in my tea. Everyone picked up their cups. I lifted mine and sniffed. No strange smell. Whatever it was, it had no aroma. "You're not drinking your tea, Mom," Octavia remarked. There was a barely perceptible note of impatience in her voice. "It's very hot," I replied, still thinking. I looked at the family at the table. Barnaby was peacefully sipping his tea, talking about work. The children were listening half-heartedly, finishing their cookies. Octavia glanced at my cup from time to time, and I saw expectation in her eyes. Expectation of what? What was supposed to happen? I tried to remember what could have been added to the tea. A sleeping pill? But why? A laxative? At that thought, I felt a chill run through me. Had my daughter decided to humiliate me in public? "I'll try your tea, Alba," Barnaby said unexpectedly. "Mine seems a little weak." "No, don't," Octavia quickly replied. "Mom added sugar, and you don't like sweet tea." "It's okay, I'll try it," Barnaby said, already reaching for my cup. At that moment, I made up my mind. Without thinking, I took Barnaby's cup and handed him mine. "Let's swap. I want some stronger tea, too." "Mom, what are you doing?" Octavia asked sharply. "Swapping cups with Barnaby. Isn't it obvious?" My son-in-law had already taken his first sip from my cup. Delicious tea, and just the right amount of sugar. Octavia turned pale. Her eyes darted between her husband and me. I calmly drank Barnaby's tea, keeping my eyes on my daughter. We looked at each other in complete silence, and in that silence, there was more understanding than in years of conversation. Now, all that was left to do was wait. 15 minutes of quiet conversation passed when Barnaby suddenly fell silent in the middle of a sentence about a new machine at the factory. He grimaced, put his hand on his stomach, and leaned forward slightly. "Is something wrong?" I asked, even though I already knew what was coming. "My stomach hurts," he muttered, wiping the sweat from his forehead. It came on suddenly. Octavia was instantly alert. Her face took on an expression of exaggerated concern, but I noticed the panic in her eyes. "Maybe he ate something bad?" She looked around the table as if searching for the culprit. "Was the chicken fresh, Mom?" "Of course it was fresh," I replied dryly. "I bought it yesterday." Barnaby began to turn pale. He tried to stand up but immediately sat back down, bent over in half. "I need to— excuse me," he said, getting up and holding onto the table, and quickly headed for the stairs leading upstairs to the bathroom. His footsteps sounded uneven and hurried. A few seconds later, we heard the door slam shut. "What's wrong with Dad?" Felix asked anxiously. "He must have eaten something bad." Cordelia put down her phone, showing interest in what was happening for the first time that evening. Octavia wrung her hands nervously. I don't understand what could have happened. He didn't eat anything unusual. I silently gathered the dirty dishes from the table. My movements were calm and measured, but inside I was in turmoil. Now I finally understood what had happened. My daughter had slipped a laxative into my tea, hoping to cause a humiliating scene. But it was innocent Barnaby who got it. Distinctive sounds came from upstairs. Cordelia grimaced. Ah, disgusting! Cordelia! Her mother scolded her, but she didn't look any better. I continued clearing the table, watching my daughter. Octavia would stand up, sit down, go to the window, then return to the table. She was trying to look like a concerned wife, but it didn't work. Too much fuss, too much acting. Should we call a doctor? Felix suggested. No, Octavia replied too quickly. I mean, let's see. Maybe it will pass. There were more noises from upstairs, louder this time. Barnaby was clearly unwell. Mom, do you have any activated charcoal? Octavia asked, and I detected a false note in her voice. I'll look in the medicine cabinet. I went upstairs. Barnaby looked terrible, pale, sweaty, holding onto the wall. When he saw me, he tried to smile. I'm sorry, Alba. Something's come over me. It's okay, dear. I'll get you some medicine. I found the activated charcoal in the bathroom and brought it to him with a glass of water. Barnaby gratefully took the tablets, but it was clear that he wasn't feeling any better. Maybe we should go home, he suggested in a weak voice. Of course. Come down when you can. Downstairs, Octavia was pacing around the living room. The children sat silently, not knowing how to react to what was happening. How is he? My daughter asked me. Not good. We need to go home. Yes, of course. But what could it be? Maybe stomach flu? I looked at her intently. Or something else. Octavia looked away. What do you mean? Nothing in particular. Just thinking out loud. Barnaby came down, leaning on the railing. He looked even worse than he had upstairs. Octavia took his arm with exaggerated concern. Darling, what's the matter? Maybe you should see a doctor after all. I'll lie down at home. It should pass. He spoke with difficulty, clearly holding back. I felt sorry for my brother-in-law. A good man, hard-working, loves his children, supports his wife in everything, and he got hit because of someone else's meanness. Get ready, Octavia said to the children. We're leaving. Felix and Cordelia started getting dressed. I walked them to the door and helped Barnaby put on his jacket. His hands were shaking. Thanks for dinner, Alba, he muttered. I'm sorry about this. Don't apologize. Get well soon. Octavia bustled around the car, trying to make her husband comfortable in the front seat. The children sat silently in the back. I stood in the doorway watching the scene. Before getting behind the wheel, my daughter came up to me. Mom, I'll call you tomorrow. I'll find out how Barnaby is. Okay. And maybe you should check the groceries? Something might have gone bad. I looked at her intently. I'll definitely check. I'll check everything. Octavia hesitated, as if she wanted to add something, but changed her mind. She nodded and walked to the car. I watched them until the car disappeared around the corner. Then I closed the door and went back to the living room. The cups were still on the table. Mine was empty. Barnaby's was empty too. I picked it up and sniffed it. There was no strange smell, but that didn't mean anything. I went to the kitchen, poured myself some water, and drank it slowly. My hands weren't shaking. My pulse was steady. 40 years as a nurse had taught me to remain calm in any situation. But inside, I was boiling. My own daughter had tried to humiliate me. She had slipped laxative into my tea, hoping to embarrass me in front of my grandchildren. Why? To show that I was becoming helpless? To prove that I needed to move into a nursing home? I sat down in Henry's chair and closed my eyes. I remembered little Octavia, a smart girl with pigtails who always wanted to be the best. She was an excellent student in school and one of the best students in her class at university. She was ambitious and determined, but somewhere along the way, something broke. Maybe it was my fault. Did I demand too much? Or, on the contrary, did I pay too little attention to her? Henry always said that Octavia needed to be stricter, that she liked to boss people around too much, but I thought it was a sign of character, of willpower. Now I understood that it was cruelty, a desire to control, humiliate, and put people in their place. And today she decided to put her own mother in her place. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. Octavia's name lit up on the display. Hello? Mom, how are you? Barnaby is feeling better. He rested at home. He probably did eat something bad. I'm glad he's feeling better. Listen, did you check the expiration dates on the food? Maybe the milk was sour or the chicken wasn't very fresh. I paused, thinking about how to respond. All the food is fresh, Octavia. I'm sure of it. Then I don't understand what could have happened. It's strange. Yes, very strange. There was silence on the line. Octavia was clearly waiting for something. An explanation, a suggestion, perhaps an apology for the poor quality food. Well, okay, she finally said. See you later. Goodbye. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. My daughter was testing me to see if I knew the truth. She was trying to figure out if I had guessed what she was up to. But I wasn't going to make her life easier by accusing her directly. Let her suffer in uncertainty. It was getting dark outside. I turned on the lamp and began clearing the remains of dinner from the table. Work helped me think. The plan was slowly but surely taking shape. Octavia wanted to show me my place? Fine. Now it was my turn to show her hers. It was already past midnight, and I was still lying in bed with my eyes open. Sleep would not come. The events of the evening were spinning around in my head, my daughter's words, Barnaby's face when he felt ill. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Octavia's face as she poured something into my cup. I got up, threw on my robe, and went down to the kitchen. I put the kettle on, not to make tea, but just to keep my hands busy. The familiar movements were calming. Where did I go wrong? At what point did my smart, beautiful girl turn into a woman capable of such cruelty? I tried to remember Octavia at different stages of her life, to find the moment when everything went wrong. As a little girl, she was a real angel. Curly blonde hair, big gray eyes, pink cheeks. The neighbors always gushed when we walked by. "What a beauty she is," they would say, and Octavia would nod importantly, already aware at the age of 4 that she was special. Maybe that was the problem, that everyone around her constantly admired her. Henry spoiled his daughter more than he should have. He bought her expensive toys, took her to the best stores, and enrolled her in a prestigious private school. "Our princess should have the best of everything," he said. And I wasn't strict either. After hard shifts at the hospital, all I wanted was peace and quiet. If Octavia was being difficult, it was easier to give in than to make a scene. Henry worked a lot, so raising the children fell mainly to me, but I often didn't have the strength. Damien was born 3 years later. He was a calm, easygoing boy who never demanded special attention. Maybe that's why Octavia got all the attention. She knew how to get it. She cried loudly, threw tantrums, and then instantly calmed down when she got what she wanted. She was a star at school. Excellent grades, leading roles in plays, victories in academic competitions. Her teachers adored her. Her classmates envied her. I was proud of my daughter and delighted in her successes. Everything seemed to be going well. The first warning signs appeared in high school. Octavia began to criticize other children, their clothes, their manners, their families. "Mom, why does Jessica dress so weird? Don't they have money for normal clothes?" Or that Michael is so stupid, I don't understand how he got into our class. I tried to explain that it wasn't nice to talk about people like that everyone has different opportunities, that what matters is character, not appearance. But Octavia just rolled her eyes. "Mom, you're too nice. In life, you have to be able to tell the difference between people who are worth something and losers." Losers. She began to use that word more and more often. Losers were her classmates from poor families. Losers were teachers who didn't indulge her. Even her own brother was a loser because he preferred reading books to playing sports or dating girls. The situation worsened at university. Octavia studied business administration and became completely immersed in a world of competition and ambition. She spoke of her classmates as rivals who had to be outdone at any cost. She spoke with contempt of her teachers if they dared to say anything to her. That was when she met Barnaby. He was studying a technical subject at the same university and worked part-time in a workshop to pay for his studies. He was a simple guy from a working-class family, honest and hardworking. I liked him right away. He was polite, sincere, and had kind eyes. But why did Octavia choose him? At the time, I thought my daughter saw a real man in Barnaby, a reliable partner. Now I understand. She needed someone she could control. Barnaby was handsome enough not to be ashamed of him in public, but not too ambitious to compete with her. After the wedding, Octavia quickly took control of the family. She decided where they would live, how they would spend their money, and who they would socialize with. Barnaby obediently agreed with all her decisions. At the time, it seemed to me that they simply complemented each other well. When the children were born, I hoped that motherhood would soften my daughter, teach her patience and understanding. At first, this was the case. Octavia devoted herself entirely to Cordelia and was a caring and attentive mother. But as the girl grew up, she began to apply the same principles to her as she did to everyone else. Cordelia had to be the best at everything, in school, in sports, in appearance. Octavia enrolled her in a dozen clubs, constantly compared her to other children, and demanded perfection. When Felix was born, the same program was repeated with him. And then Henry died, suddenly, of a heart attack, at the age of 59. We were all in shock, but Octavia took her father's death as a personal catastrophe. Not because she was grieving, although she was, of course, but mainly because she had lost her main source of admiration and support. After the funeral, she started coming to see me more often. At first, I thought my daughter was concerned about my condition and wanted to support me during a difficult time. But I quickly realized that Octavia had simply switched to a new object of control. Now that her father was gone, she had decided to take control of my life. It started with little things. Mom, that hairstyle makes you look old. Mom, why do you buy such cheap food? Mom, that doctor is incompetent. I'll find you a better one. Every visit turned into a lecture on how I should live my life. I tried to resist, explaining that I was capable of making my own decisions. But Octavia wouldn't listen. She was convinced that she knew best what was right for everyone around her, and if someone disagreed with her, it meant they weren't smart enough to understand that she was right. The kettle whistled, interrupting my thoughts. I brewed some weak herbal tea and sat down by the kitchen window. It was quiet outside, with only the occasional car passing by, its headlights illuminating the sleeping houses. What happened today was not just another attempt at control, it was open humiliation. Octavia wanted to show the children that their grandmother was a frail old woman who couldn't even control her own body. She wanted to prove that I needed to move to a nursing home where I would be properly cared for. But her plan failed. Instead, Barnaby, a man who had never hurt anyone, suffered. Octavia framed her own husband, the father of her children. And even after that, she tried to shift the blame onto me, hinting at poor quality food. I finished my tea and went upstairs. The bedroom was quiet and dark. I went to bed, but sleep still wouldn't come. A plan was forming in my head. If my daughter wanted to play games of humiliation, she would get them. But I would set the rules. I had something Octavia didn't expect. Documents signed 3 years ago when the young family bought the house. At the time, they didn't have enough money for the down payment, so I agreed to be the guarantor on the mortgage. What's more, I contributed a significant amount from Henry's savings. It's an investment in our grandchildren's future, Octavia said at the time. We'll pay it all back. But of course, no one was in a hurry to pay it back. Instead, my daughter got the opportunity to live in a nice neighborhood, in a beautiful house that they couldn't have bought without my help. Octavia was used to getting only help and support from me. She forgot that there are two sides to every coin, that a guarantee can be revoked, that debts can be demanded to be repaid. I knew it would hurt the family. They would have to find a new place to live, perhaps less comfortable. The children would be upset. Barnaby would blame himself, even though he was not to blame for what had happened. But Octavia had to understand that she couldn't play games like this with me. I am not a helpless old woman who can be humiliated and controlled. I am a mother who deserves respect. And if my daughter has forgotten that, it's time to remind her. Dawn was breaking outside. I finally felt I could sleep. The plan was ready. In the morning, I woke up with a clear head. I had only slept a few hours, but I felt surprisingly alert. The plan that had matured overnight seemed right and reasonable. Now I had to work out the details. After breakfast, I went to Henry's study. He had always been very meticulous about keeping his papers in order. Every document was in its place. All the folders were labeled and sorted by year. After his death, I hadn't changed anything except for moving the most important documents to the safe. The folder I needed was called Mortgage Octavia. Inside were all the documents related to the purchase of her daughter's house. I laid them out on the desk and studied them carefully. The guarantee agreement was dated March 22, 2022. At that time, Octavia and Barnaby had found their dream home in a nice neighborhood in Lakeview, but the bank required a down payment of $100,000. The young family didn't have that kind of money. I remembered that conversation well. My daughter came home upset, almost in tears. "Mom, we found the perfect house for the kids. There's a good school nearby, it's a safe neighborhood, and it has a big yard. But we don't have enough money for the down payment." Henry immediately offered to help. "We can't leave the kids without a roof over their heads," he said. I was more cautious. It was a lot of money, almost half of our savings. But my husband convinced me. "Alba, these are our grandchildren. We have to give them a good future." In the end, we not only became guarantors for the mortgage, but also contributed $75,000 of our own money. Octavia promised to pay us back in installments of $5,000 a year. In 3 years, we only got $10,000 back. Our daughter constantly found reasons to delay the payments. I reread the terms of the guarantee agreement. The bank had the right to demand full repayment of the debt from the guarantor in the event of a breach of obligations by the borrower. But the guarantor could also withdraw their guarantee, provided they gave the bank 30 days' notice. An interesting point. So I could withdraw from the agreement at any time, and then the bank would decide on further lending only with Octavia and Barnaby. And given their income, especially after my daughter switched to part-time work, it was unlikely that the bank would consider them solvent without additional guarantees. I took out my calculator and calculated the outstanding balance. $230,000 is a substantial amount. The monthly payment was about $2,000, which was a significant burden for a family with Barnaby's income. The folder also contained documents regarding the return of my funds. Octavia signed a receipt for $75,000 with a commitment to repay it within 15 years. In fact, it was an interest-free loan. I didn't demand interest, deciding to help the children. The phone rang, interrupting my calculations. My daughter's name appeared on the display. "Hi, Mom. How are you?" "Fine. How are you?" "Everything's fine. Barnaby is better and has gone to work. He must have eaten something bad." I said nothing, continuing to study the documents. "Mom, can you hear me?" "I can hear you. I'm glad Barnaby is better. Did you get sick yesterday?" "I just thought maybe you felt bad after dinner." An interesting question. Octavia was checking to see if what she had put in my tea had worked, so she still wasn't sure I knew the truth. "No, I feel fine. Should I have gotten sick?" "No, of course not. I'm just worried. At your age, any digestive upset can be dangerous." "At my age," I repeated. Interesting way of putting it. "Mom, I didn't mean it that way. I'm just worried about you." "I see." There was an awkward pause. Octavia was clearly expecting a warmer response from me, but I wasn't going to indulge her. "Listen, when are you coming to town next? Maybe you could stop by? The kids miss their grandmother." "I don't know yet. I've got a lot to do." "What do you have to do? You're retired." There it was, the familiar disdain, as if retirees had no right to their own plans and interests. "I have things to do," I replied curtly. All right, I just wanted to offer to help. Call me if you need anything." "I will." After my daughter hung up, I sat there with the phone in my hand for a while. Octavia was nervous, it was obvious. She was trying to figure out if I suspected anything, while maintaining the appearance of a caring daughter. But I was more concerned with another question. How far was I willing to go in my revenge? Withdrawing my sponsorship would seriously complicate the family's life. They might have to sell their house and move to a less prestigious neighborhood. The children would have to change schools and lose their friends. On the other hand, Octavia hadn't thought about the consequences when she planned my humiliation. She was willing to disgrace me in front of her grandchildren to prove she was right. Why should I be more merciful to her than she was to me? I stood up and paced around the office. On the shelves were photos of the whole family, wedding pictures, children's birthdays, family vacations. In one of the photos, Octavia was about 6 years old, sitting on my lap and laughing. Back then, she was just a little girl who believed that her mother could solve any problem. Where was that girl? When did she turn into a woman capable of betrayal? Maybe the problem was me. I let her get away with too much, demanded too little. Or maybe I was too strict and didn't let her feel my unconditional love. But now it was too late to look for reasons. The important thing was to decide what to do next. I went back to the documents. Next to the guarantee agreement was a copy of the house appraisal. $350,000. That was its value 3 years ago. Now, with the rise in real estate prices, it would be worth even more. If the bank demanded early repayment of the loan, Octavia and Barnaby would have to sell the house. After paying the bank, they would have about $120,000 left, enough to buy a more modest home, but nowhere near the neighborhood where they currently lived. And what about my $75,000? By law, I had the right to demand its return at any time. My daughter certainly didn't have that kind of money. It all went to maintaining her lifestyle and expensive purchases. I opened my laptop and went to the bank's website. I found the section for guarantors and studied the procedure for withdrawing a guarantee. It was all quite simple. I had to submit a written statement and wait for it to be reviewed. The bank had the right to either agree to the withdrawal or demand early repayment of the loan. Given the borrower's financial situation, the second option was more likely. Octavia and Barnaby simply did not have enough income to obtain a loan without additional guarantees. I printed out the application form and studied it carefully. It was not necessary to state the reason for withdrawing the guarantee. It was enough to declare my desire to terminate the obligation. The law protected the rights of guarantors, allowing them to withdraw from the agreement if circumstances changed. And circumstances had indeed changed. 3 years ago, I was helping a loving daughter who wanted the best for her children. Now I realized that I had been helping a woman who considered me a burden and was willing to humiliate me to achieve her goals. The home phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Alba Crampton? Yes. This is Dr. Harrison from the clinic. I'm calling about your scheduled checkup on Wednesday. We need to reschedule for Friday. Would that be possible? Of course. Great. And don't forget to bring the test results you submitted last month. After talking to the doctor, I started to wonder. A scheduled checkup. Octavia had always been interested in the results of my medical examinations. At your age, you need to keep a close eye on your health, she would say. And I obediently told her about all my visits to the doctor, my test results, and the specialist's recommendations. Now I understood that my daughter wasn't gathering information out of concern for my health. She was waiting for me to develop serious problems that she could use as an excuse to move me into a nursing home. Mom can't live alone anymore, she would tell relatives and acquaintances. She has memory/heart/blood pressure problems. But for now, my health was fine. My blood pressure was normal, my heart was working fine, and my memory was clear. The last time I saw the doctor, he even said I looked younger than my age. I looked at the withdrawal of sponsorship form again. The decision was practically made. All that remained was to decide on the timing. When would be the best time to submit the documents? Today was Monday. If I submitted the application tomorrow, the bank would review it within a week. By next Monday, Octavia would receive notification that her guarantor was withdrawing their commitment, and then the fun would begin. I carefully put all the documents back in the folder. The decision had been made. On Tuesday morning, I woke up early and knew immediately that today was the day. There were no doubts or hesitations. The decision had been made overnight and now needed to be carried out. After breakfast, I got ready carefully. I put on a strict dark blue suit that I had bought for Henry's funeral, but which was perfect for serious business meetings. I carefully styled my hair and put on some makeup. The woman looking back at me in the mirror knew exactly what she wanted. I put the documents in the leather folder that Henry had used for important papers. My passport, income statement, a copy of the guarantee agreement, and the completed withdrawal form. Everything was ready. Lakeview Trust Bank was located in the city center in a beautiful red brick building. I took the bus there, although I could have called a taxi, but I wanted time to think, a last chance to change my mind. On the way, I reread the statement several times, checking every line. I hereby request the revocation of my mortgage guarantee for loan number. The dry official phrases concealed the family drama that had been unfolding for several days. The bank was quiet and cool. Soft furniture, subdued lighting, and quiet classical music all created an atmosphere of reliability and respectability. A young woman with a professional smile sat behind the information desk. Welcome to Lakeview Trust. How can I help you? I need to speak to a mortgage specialist. I have a question about a guarantee. Of course, please see James Whitfield, the manager. Office number 5. James Whitfield was a middle-aged man with a pleasant appearance. He had graying temples, kind brown eyes behind glasses, and soft manners. He stood up from behind his desk when I entered and offered his hand gallantly. Alba Crampton, I presume? It's a pleasure to meet you. Please have a seat. Coffee? Tea? No, thank you. I sat down in a soft chair opposite his desk and took out a folder with documents. So, you have a question about a guarantee? Mr. Whitfield opened his computer and prepared to type. I want to withdraw my guarantee for my daughter's mortgage. The manager's fingers froze over the keyboard. He looked at me intently, as if trying to understand if he had heard correctly. Withdraw the guarantee? May I have the loan number? I dictated the number, and Mr. Whitfield quickly found the necessary information in the system. Yes, I see. The loan was issued in March 2022 for $325,000. The guarantors are you and your late husband. The outstanding balance is $228,000. That's correct. Mrs. Crampton, may I ask why you made this decision? The fact is that withdrawing your guarantee could create serious problems for the borrower. I was silent, thinking about my answer. I didn't want to tell the bank clerk about my family problems. Circumstances have changed, I finally said. I understand, but you must understand the consequences. Without your guarantee, the borrower's income may not be sufficient to continue the loan. The bank will be forced to review the terms or demand early repayment. I understand. Mr. Whitfield took off his glasses and wiped them, clearly playing for time. It was clear that he didn't know how to handle the situation. Mrs. Crampton, have you discussed this decision with your daughter? Perhaps you should talk to your family first? No, I haven't, and I don't intend to. But this could result in you losing your home. Your grandchildren may not have a place to live. The mention of my grandchildren hurt, but I didn't show it. Mr. Whitfield was trying to play on my emotions, but I was prepared for that. My grandchildren will not be left without a roof over their heads. Their parents will find a solution. But why create additional difficulties for them? The loan has been paid without any problems all these years. I have the right to withdraw my guarantee under the terms of the agreement, I said firmly. The manager sighed and put his glasses back on. Yes, of course, you have that right. We just always try to find a solution that works for everyone. He paused, looking through the documents on his screen. Tell me, what if we offer to change the terms of the guarantee? For example, reduce your liability to a certain amount. No, I want to get out of the deal completely. How about a deferral? We can record your intention but give the family time to find another guarantor or increase their income. I shook my head. I need to file the application today. Mr. Whitfield realized that he would not be able to change my mind. He opened a desk drawer and took out an application form. All right, let's get the paperwork done. Did you bring your application? I handed him the completed form. The manager studied it carefully, checking the information against the computer. Everything is correct. Now I'll need to make copies of your documents. While he was copying my passport and income statement, I looked around the office. Diplomas and certificates hung on the walls, and photos of Mr. Whitfield's family, his wife, 2 children, and dog, stood on the desk. He seemed like an ordinary family man who was just doing his job. Mrs. Crampton, Mr. Whitfield put down the documents and looked at me seriously. I am obliged to warn you of all the possible consequences. After you submit the application, the bank will have 30 days to review it. We will notify the borrowers of your decision. They will receive a letter within a week. I see. If the bank decides to call in the loan early, the borrowers will have 30 days to find the funds. If they are unable to repay the debt, the house will be put up for auction. Those words hit me particularly hard. A house at auction meant that the family would lose not only their home, but also the money they had invested in it. What if they find another guarantor? I asked. Then the loan will continue under the same terms, but finding a guarantor with sufficient income and assets is not easy. Octavia has a brother, but Damien lives in another state and is unlikely to agree to take on such a commitment. Barnaby's parents are retired and have modest incomes. They have no other relatives with sufficient financial resources. There is another option, Mr. Whitfield continued. The borrowers could try to refinance the loan with another bank, but without a guarantor and with their income, that would be difficult. I nodded to show that I understood all the risks. Then please sign here, here, and here. I signed in 3 places, clearly writing each letter. With each signature, the finality of the decision grew stronger. Excellent! Your application has been accepted for consideration. Within 7 business days, you will receive written notification of the bank's decision. A copy of this notification will be sent to the borrowers. Mr. Whitfield stood up and held out his hand. Thank you for coming to our bank. I hope the situation will be resolved in the best way possible for all parties. As I left the bank, I felt a strange sense of relief. The documents had been submitted, the decision had been made. There was no turning back. Now all I had to do was wait and see how things unfolded. The sun was shining brightly and the streets were bustling. People were rushing about their business, unaware that I had just changed my family's life. The thought was both frightening and liberating. I took the bus home, lost in thought. In a week, Octavia would receive a letter from the bank. How would she react? Would she try to contact me to find out why? Or would she immediately start looking for a way out of the situation? At home, I made some tea and sat down in Henry's chair. The folder with the documents was on the table next to me. Now it was missing one important statement, the very one that had set off a chain of events that was now impossible to stop. I felt no remorse, only fatigue and a strange sense of completion. For many years, I had played the role of the obedient mother who helps and supports without asking for anything in return. Now that role was over. The letter from the bank arrived on Monday of the following week. I knew it because at 10:30 in the morning the phone rang, and all I could hear on the other end was Octavia's heavy, angry breathing. What does this mean? She finally managed to say. Good morning, dear. What are you talking about? Don't pretend. We just got a letter from the bank. Did you withdraw your guarantee? I put down my cup of tea and settled more comfortably in my chair. The moment of truth had arrived. Yes, I did. There was silence on the line for a few seconds. Then Octavia exploded. Are you out of your mind? We have children. We need this house. How could you? It's very simple. I filed a statement with the bank. But why? What did we do to you? An interesting question. Octavia really didn't understand that she had done anything wrong. I thought you could manage without my help, I replied calmly. Mom, stop talking in riddles. Explain what's going on. What's going on is that I no longer want to be the guarantor on your loan. That's impossible. You can't just cancel everything. We have a contract. Read the terms of the contract carefully, Octavia. The guarantor has the right to withdraw from the agreement. Silence again. Apparently, my daughter had never read the fine print in bank documents. We're coming over, she finally said. Right now. As you wish. I hung up and continued drinking my tea. In an hour and a half, they would be here, and the most difficult conversation of my life would begin. I needed to prepare myself mentally. Exactly an hour and 20 minutes passed when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Then a door slammed, then another. That meant they had arrived together, Octavia and Barnaby. My daughter didn't even knock. She burst into the house as if it belonged to her, her face red with anger and her eyes burning. Barnaby followed, looking confused and miserable. Mom, explain to me right now what the hell you're doing. Hello, Octavia. Hello, Barnaby. Come into the living room. I'm not going anywhere. I demand an explanation. Barnaby put his hand on his wife's shoulder. Octa, calm down. Let's talk about this first. Talk? She turned sharply to her husband. My mother is leaving us homeless and you want to talk? I'm not leaving anyone homeless, I interjected. The house is yours, the mortgage is yours. You'll just have to work things out with the bank on your own now. Octavia stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. On our own? Mom, are you out of your mind? Without a guarantor, the bank will demand early repayment. We don't have $200,000. Then you'll have to find a solution. What solution? Sell the house? Move to God knows where? Change the kids' schools? I sat down in my chair, indicating that I was ready for a long conversation. Octavia continued to stand in the middle of the living room, waving her arms. Sit down, daughter. Let's talk calmly. I'm not going to sit down. I want to know what happened to my mother. You always helped us before, and now you've suddenly decided to screw us over. Barnaby cautiously sat down on the edge of the sofa. He clearly felt out of his element, but he knew he had to support his wife. Alba, he said quietly, maybe you can tell us what happened. We really don't understand. I looked at my brother-in-law with sympathy. A good man had been caught in the crossfire because of someone else's stupidity. Barnaby, do you remember what happened last Sunday? After dinner? He grimaced. I felt sick, an upset stomach. Exactly. And didn't you wonder why? Octavia turned sharply to me. What does Sunday have to do with it? It has to do with the fact that on that day, I realized something about my daughter. What exactly? I stood up and walked over to the window. Through the glass, I could see the garden Henry had planted with his own hands. The trees had already shed their leaves in preparation for winter. I realized that my daughter thinks I'm so inadequate that she decided to humiliate me in public. What are you talking about? I turned around and looked closely at Octavia. You put something in my tea. A laxative, I think. My daughter's face turned pale instantly. Barnaby looked up sharply. What? He asked. Your wife decided to disgrace me in front of her grandchildren. She wanted to show that their grandmother no longer has control over her body and needs special care. Barnaby slowly turned to Octavia. Is that true? I didn't, his daughter stammered, unable to find the words. But the plan failed, I continued, because I noticed what you were doing and switched cups with Barnaby. In the end, an innocent man suffered. My brother-in-law stood up from the sofa. His face was a picture of shock. Octavia, did you really do that? Barney, I can explain. Explain what? That you poisoned me instead of your mother? It wasn't poison. It was just a cleansing remedy. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My daughter was trying to justify her actions as if putting laxatives in someone else's food was normal. A cleansing remedy? Barnaby asked again. Octavia, do you understand what you're saying? Mom has become so stubborn lately. She doesn't listen to advice. She doesn't want to think about the future. I just wanted to show her that she's not as independent as she thinks she is. Show her by humiliating her in front of the children? I asked. Not humiliating her, just showing her the reality. Barnaby ran his hand over his face. My God, Octavia, how could you? Don't judge me. You don't understand what it's like to watch your mother ruin her life. Living alone in a huge house, refusing help, not thinking about her safety. And that's why you decided to disgrace her? I decided to open her eyes. I sat back down in the chair. The conversation was taking exactly the turn I had expected. Octavia was not remorseful. She was defensive. Daughter, I said calmly, have you ever considered that I have the right to decide how I want to live? What right? At your age, people often make bad decisions. At my age, I repeated. Interesting. And at what age, in your opinion, does a person lose the right to independence? That's not the point. That is the point. You think I'm incapable of managing my own life. Barnaby sat down again, but further away from his wife. Alba, why did you withdraw your sponsorship? That won't solve the problem. Barnaby, I helped you when I thought my help was needed by a loving family. Now I realize that I'm just financing a woman who doesn't respect me. Mom, that's ridiculous. Of course I respect you. Respect isn't shown by trying to humiliate someone. Octavia exploded again. Enough about this tea. One stupid mistake and you're ready to ruin your grandchildren's lives. One stupid mistake? I stood up from the chair. Octavia, You put laxatives in my food to embarrass me in front of the children. That's not stupid, that's betrayal. Betrayal? I've taken care of you my whole life. Taken care of me or controlled me? What's the difference? There it was. Octavia really didn't see the difference between caring and controlling. The difference, I said, is that caring involves respecting another person's wishes. Controlling is an attempt to bend them to your will. Barnaby nodded. Alba's right, Octi. You're always telling everyone how to live their lives. I'm helping people make the right decisions. Whose decisions? Yours or theirs? My daughter looked confusedly at her husband, then at me. I don't understand what's going on. Why are you all suddenly turning against me? No one is against you, I said. It's just time to tell the truth. The next half hour was spent in heated arguments. Octavia tried to prove that she had acted with the best of intentions. Barnaby gradually realized how many years he had lived with a woman who considered him incapable of making his own decisions. I just listened and wondered how long we had all put up with this situation. Finally, Octavia sat down on the sofa, exhausted. All right, she said. Let's say I was wrong about the tea, but that's no reason to take our house away from us. No one is taking your house away. You'll just have to work things out with the bank without my involvement. Mom, we can't get a loan without a guarantor? Then you'll have to sell the house and buy something more affordable. My daughter started crying. For the first time that evening, her tears seemed genuine. We had such a good life. The kids are happy. They have a great school, friends. Life will go on somewhere else. But why? What for? I went over to my daughter and sat down next to her. Octavia, I'm not punishing you. I just don't want to be in a relationship where I'm not respected anymore. Barnaby stood up. I think we should go. Thanks for the honest talk, Alba. He took his wife by the arm and led her to the door. Octavia walked, sobbing and looking back at me. At the door, she stopped. Mom, this isn't forever, is it? I didn't answer. I didn't know the answer to that question myself. November in Lakeview was cold and rainy. I spent my days doing the usual things: reading, cooking, gardening, meeting with a few friends. Life went on quietly and calmly as it should for a 67-year-old widow. I didn't hear from Octavia for a month. At first, I waited for her calls, but then I stopped. My daughter had clearly decided that silence was the best way to make me reconsider my decision. She was wrong. Barnaby called twice. The first time was a week after our conversation. He asked very politely about my health and sent his regards from the children. The second time was 2 weeks later. He said they had found a buyer for the house and would be moving soon. I replied that I wished them well, and that was the end of the conversation. In mid-November, I learned from my neighbor, Martha Wilson, that Octavia's family had indeed sold the house. Martha worked at a local real estate agency and was always up to date on all the deals in the neighborhood. It's a shame, of course, she said, sipping tea in my kitchen. They were good neighbors. The children were well behaved. Barnaby always helped out if anything was needed. And Octavia was such an energetic woman. I said nothing. Martha didn't know the details of the family drama and wasn't supposed to. They say they moved to the neighborhood near the old factory. The house is smaller, of course, but it's perfect for a young family. The neighborhood near the old factory was a working-class area, mostly populated by factory families and retirees. It wasn't poor, but it wasn't prestigious either. Octavia must have been upset about the decline in her social status. I thought about my grandchildren. Cordelia and Felix had to change schools, find new friends, and get used to a different environment. It wasn't easy, especially for Cordelia. At 16, every change seems like a disaster. But children adapt faster than adults. Perhaps the new school would even be good for them. Less snobbery, more simple human relationships. On Saturday, November 23rd, as I was sorting through photos in an album, the doorbell rang. Barnaby stood on the doorstep alone with a bouquet of chrysanthemums in his hands. Hi, Alba, can I come in? Of course, come in. He looked tired but calm. He was wearing an old jacket and jeans, his hair slightly unkempt, a working man on his day off. The flowers are beautiful, I said, taking the bouquet. Chrysanthemums are your favorite, I remember. We went into the kitchen. I put the flowers in a vase and turned on the kettle. Barnaby sat down at the table and looked around the familiar space. I miss this house, he said quietly. How are things in your new place? We're getting used to it. It's smaller but cozy. The garden is small, but I'm already planning what to plant in the spring. Barnaby had always loved working with the earth. It calmed him after hard shifts at the factory. How are the children? They're adjusting. Felix is doing even better. There are fewer bullies at his new school, and he's already made friends. Cordelia, well, teenagers have a hard time with change. I poured tea into the cups, the ones with thick rims that Octavia didn't like. Barnaby, how's Octavia? How's she coping with all this? He paused, thinking about his answer. It's been tough. The first few weeks she was in a daze. Then she was angry, blaming everyone. Now she seems to be coming around. Does she still think I'm wrong? Honestly, yes. Octavia isn't used to admitting she's wrong, but she's starting to understand. Barnaby took a sip of tea and looked me in the eyes. Alba, can I be honest? Of course. That conversation a month ago cleared a lot of things up for me. I realized that I'd been living with a woman who thinks I'm incapable of making decisions. It was painful to hear, but I nodded to show that I understood. Octavia isn't a bad person, he continued. She's just used to always being right. She thinks she knows best. And when someone disagrees with her, she tries to force them? Yes, or convince them, or, as in your case, prove them wrong. We were silent. Rain drizzled outside, bare branches of an old maple tree tapping against the window. What do you think about all this? I asked. Barnaby sighed. I think we've all been silent for too long. You, me, even the children. We let Octavia decide for us because it was easier. And then it turned out that she got used to it and thinks it's normal. And now? Now we have to learn to live in a new way. Octavia gets angry when I make decisions without her approval, but she's gradually getting used to it. Interesting. So my actions have affected not only my relationship with my daughter, but the whole family. Barnaby, do the children know what happened between Octavia and me? They know you had a fight. We didn't tell them the details. Why traumatize them? Cordelia asked if we'd be seeing you at Christmas. The mention of the holidays made my heart ache. Christmas had always been a family celebration. Henry would decorate the tree, I would cook the turkey, Octavia would bring the children, and we would spend the day together. Last year, the first without Henry, the tradition continued. And now? What did you say to her? I don't know, that it depends on a lot of things. Barnaby finished his tea and carefully placed the cup on the saucer. Alba, I didn't just come to see how you were. I wanted to tell you something. I'm listening. Thank you. I looked at him in surprise. For what? For making us all take an honest look at our lives. Octavia won't appreciate it, at least not yet. But your actions have helped me understand a lot. Like what? Like I have a voice in my own family, that my opinion matters too, that I don't have to agree with my wife on everything just to avoid conflict. Barnaby spoke quietly, but there was a new confidence in his voice. And how does Octavia react to that? In different ways. Sometimes she gets angry, sometimes she's surprised, and sometimes I see something like respect in her eyes. We fell silent again. The conversation was difficult, but important. Alba, can I ask you a personal question? Go ahead. Do you miss us? The children, I mean. Of course she missed them, especially Felix with his sincerity, and Cordelia with her youthful idealism. But admitting it would mean showing weakness. I miss them, I replied honestly. But that doesn't mean I'm ready to return to our previous relationship. What if the relationship changes? In what way? Towards mutual respect. An interesting formulation. So Barnaby really understood the essence of the problem. Barnaby, respect cannot be demanded or begged for, it can only be earned. I understand. And what do I need to do to earn it? I stood up and walked over to the window. The rain was getting heavier, and the road was glistening with water. You need to acknowledge that other people have a right to make their own decisions, even if those decisions seem wrong. That will be difficult for Octavia to accept. Then she'll have to live with the consequences. Barnaby stood up and came over to me. What if she tries? What if she really changes? We'll see. He started to leave, but stopped at the door. Alba, the children say hello. They say they love their grandmother. After he left, I sat in Henry's chair for a long time, thinking about our conversation. Barnaby had changed, that was obvious. He had become more confident, more independent. Whether that was good for his marriage to Octavia, only time would tell. But the main thing was that he had learned his lesson. He had learned that sometimes you have to show your teeth to be respected. That submission is not always a virtue. Perhaps Octavia would understand that someday too.